Right now, Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
Thank you, Jessica Guay, and welcome everybody to the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. I'm your host, Josh Taylor, once again on a Friday night, and plenty to discuss. Pirates go down to Atlanta. They lose the first game of that weekend set up against a former Pirate who's a familiar face. Also, Brian Reynolds extends his hitting streak to 24 games. Plus, Jake Gensel, could he have a new contract with Carolina by the end of the weekend? We could talk about those things and more. And to help me do that, my guest this evening, if you've been around on Friday nights, you've seen enough of her. She's back again in the KDKA-AM 1020 newsroom. Suzie Cool joins me. Suzie, we'll start talking about the Buccos here. They go to Truist Park and lose to Atlanta 6-1 this evening. Martin Perez activated off the 15-day injured list. He gets the start tonight, but it looked like he just could not get out of the gate, Suzie. And Atlanta was just all over him from the second inning on. Austin Riley was the one that started it off with a solo home run. Then in the third, they just rough him up for 5 runs, and he never really got into a rhythm from there.
I mean, Atlanta showed how good they are at home, right? They were 5-1 over their last 6 games at home, and they came into tonight ready to go to battle, and they did that against Martin Perez, who comes back after not really pitching for a month. He had 1 rehab start with Indy just 6 days ago. However, he goes 4 innings tonight, allows 6 earned runs, 8 hits. They were just on his changeup early on, and then he tries to go to the slider and the cutter, and the Braves just adjusted to him on the fly. So Martin Perez, he's a veteran, and he's that veteran that's going to be in this rotation for the young guns to kind of look up to. But now he's got to get back into a rhythm, as Jared Jones, Paul Skeens, Mitch Keller have all kind of found their rhythms at this point in the season.
Yeah, and we're not going to see Jared Jones in this weekend series. The Pirates have already announced that they're going to skip his start this time around. They're trying to preserve him down the stretch. I imagine the same thing is going to happen with Paul Skeens in the near future as well. They're going to try to keep these guys going. They don't want them to go over their innings limits too early in the season. They want these guys around for the second half. So you're going to see this happen periodically. But on the other side of it, it does say a lot about the situation with the pitching staff right now. And you and I have talked about this extensively. They were going to need a 5th guy to come in and fill that spot because they couldn't survive with doing the bullpen games over and over again. They went through it twice and it worked. The third time it didn't go so well. We knew that wasn't a permanent thing. So they've got to figure out how to get some stabilization with the 5th guy. And if they keep skipping starts for Jones and Skeens to keep them going down the road, they may have to put a 6th guy in here to make it work.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. You're going to have to find a 6th guy to kind of fill that rotation, especially if you have to watch the innings of Jones and Skeens from here on out heading into the second half. You don't want them to go over those innings or, even really be teetering too close. So what is that solution going to be? Martin Perez, he's, like I said, that veteran in this rotation now. Whenever you look at how young the Bucs starting rotation really is. So tonight might not be the best indication of what he can put out, but the next time he goes out, he's got to eat up more innings so that if the bullpen does need to make more of those spot starts, that they're able and ready to do so.
412-575-2600. That is the number to give us a call, or you can shoot me a tweet at Josh Taylor HD. We're answering tweets, we're answering phone calls when we come back, and we will have our tweet of the night as well after this break. Stick around. Welcome back. Time for our GMC Sierra tweet of the night. Comes from the Young Bucks Twitter account. On June 28th, 2023, of course, a year ago today, Jarrett Triolo made his MLB debut with the Pirates. And Jarrett Triolo's timing last season was actually pretty good, considering the fact it was during an injury to keep Brian Hayes. Triolo steps in at third. Became a pretty consistent fixture there for that short period of time, of course, till Hayes got healthy. But Jarrett Triolo was one of those guys, Suzie Cool, that had a lot of promise when he made that debut this time a year ago. I'd say, honestly, maybe a little bit disappointing as far as some of the things we've seen with him. We always knew him to, well, I shouldn't say we always, but we had come to know him, at least last season, as somewhat of at least consistent bat, if for no other reason, making contact with the ball and putting it in play. That hasn't been the case this year. There never really has been much of a profile for power. I think that's been a frustration with some people, but it's not like it's a surprise there. But I think we expected more of Jarrett Triolo going into this season, and we're just not seeing it, Suzie.
I think Triolo is one of those players that might be put in one of those hard positions, though, whenever it comes to the Pirates. You got to think about the position that he's in whenever he's getting tossed around to all of these different positions on the field and within the batting lineup. And it's hard for him to kind of see that consistency whenever you're being placed all over the place. And then Hayes is now back in the lineup. So where does he go? Does he go to second base? Is he in the lineup for the night? And that's kind of where you see the struggle with a lot of these utility players, not just on the Pirates, but whenever it comes to any team, is they need those consistent at-bats to really get those repetitions and get their stats up. And whenever you're not seeing that every single night, then it's kind of hard to grasp onto something.
Yeah, you hear people use the term utility guys if it's some kind of knock or if it's some kind of negative connotation. I'd make the argument, if you are a utility guy, if you are a true utility guy who plays multiple positions, who may only get a start once a week, but he's playing around different positions. Maybe you're a defensive replacement late in the game. You're a guy who has to do a lot of different things. You probably got 3-4 gloves in your bag. You're probably doing a lot of different jobs, and it's not easy to do. Some players never really master one position, much less mastering 2 or 3. It's really kind of an unsung job on a major league roster. Got a good tweet here during the break, and it's alluded to something you and I have talked about previously. When the Pirates do a bullpen game, shouldn't they just have Luis Ortiz be the starter instead of using a bullpen guy and maybe losing some extra arms the next day? And the last time he started, Suzie, Luis Ortiz looked pretty good. And this is something you and I talked about when they did those bullpen games. He would come in and piggyback. I want to say the first time he came in, I think it was 4 1/3 innings. He gave up 1 run. I think the second time he went 5 scoreless. Then he gets the start, and I think he went 6 1/3. So Luis Ortiz maybe has given himself a little bit of rope and maybe gained some confidence that he should be a starter more consistently and maybe get more opportunities.
Yeah, and maybe he's that go-to kind of sixth guy for the Pirates in this rotation, right? Or maybe this is a really good chance for Ortiz in these spot starts to kind of prove that, hey, if a starter is struggling, he can really eat up those middle innings so that the Pirates can go to Chapman, in the 9th or whatever. He can eat up, 5, 6, 7, or whatever it is for the team. So I think that this is a good indication of what Ortiz can do for this team, especially his last time out going as far into the game as he did. But I really think it's a big indication of what he can do for those middle innings when a starter might be struggling, which honestly the Pirates really haven't seen that much of because the rotation has been so strong this season.
We just talked about utility guys as hitters and fielders being able to do a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
You know what else is pretty hard? Pitching in different parts of the game. Pitching in middle innings, pitching in long relief, pitching as a starter. Because you're talking about 3 different routines that pitchers go through to prepare for 3 different roles. And Luis Ortiz has had to do that already throughout the course of this season. But to his credit, he's gotten opportunities and he's handled them pretty well. 412-575-2600. Kirk and Manor, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Hey, how are you guys doing tonight?
Good. Appreciate you, Kirk.
Real quick. Yep. Hey, real quick. Do you think that the Pirate organization will get any bats to help their offense? And why are they preserving young guys' arms? And obviously, they want to throw, and they're young guys.
Kirk, they have to. They have to. That's the answer to the question, and thank you for the call. They have to preserve young arms. Suzie, this is not something, it's not just the Pirates, it's not just in Major League Baseball, it's all over the place. You hate to use the word because I think it gets overused, but it does feel like it's that level. It feels like an epidemic of injuries, whether it's shoulder, it used to be shoulder injuries. That was the beginning of it all. Then it became elbow injuries, and the truth of the matter is, I think we've talked about this before. You have a new wave now where the emphasis of pitching is specifically on getting the most out of velocity. It's getting the most out of spin rate. It's getting the most out of missing bats as much as humanly possible. And the toll that takes on an arm, it's not like anything we've seen before because it's never been emphasized as much as it's been right now. It's never been maximized as much as it is right now. We love to point to those unicorn random arms. Like we love to point to Cy Young. We love to point to Nolan Ryan. But Suzie, they were the exception. They were not the rule. Some of these other guys, they might have been able to go longer innings, but there was more of an emphasis on off-speed pitching. There was more of an emphasis on location and saving yourself down the road. They don't do that with these guys now. These guys are trying to maximize velocity. They're trying to go full effort on every pitch. And you see the wear and tear that it shows, not only in the course of a game, but you add in the fact that hitters are taking pitches more. They're trying to work the count more. They're trying to get into the bullpen faster. All that adds up not only in a game, but over time as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun watching Jared Jones and Paul Skeens go, back-to-back days and watching them hit the upper 90s and over 100 miles per hour. But like you said, Josh, that takes a lot of wear and tear on these young guys' arms. It's not easy for them to go out and not only pitch that fast, but then Paul Skeens has already hit 100 pitches in how many games this season, and he only has how many starts. So you don't want him to be hitting, 100 pitches every single time he goes out in the games. Plus, he's rifling how many pitches over 100 miles per hour. That's going to take a lot of wear and tear on his arm. And if you want to keep being impressed by what he can bring, then you got to keep that pitch count down. You got to keep him out of there for, certain innings. Now, if it's a huge game and, we're talking like a no-hitter situation or a perfect game situation, yeah, keep him in. Like that's going to keep the fans engaged. That's going to keep them wanting more. However, if it's not worth that kind of stat, then don't take him out and waste that.
Yeah, and it also points to a specific thing that you mentioned. You mentioned Paul Skeens. Here's something else we need to take in consideration. Remember, a year ago, he was pitching college ball. He was in the College World Series right around this time a year ago, or just finishing up the College World Series. College baseball, they'll keep pitchers in for 100, 120, 130 pitches, and they won't think twice. Why? Because that guy pitches one time a week most weeks during a regular season. They get into a postseason tournament, they may pitch once every 5 or 6 days, but they can afford to let those guys go that length because they know they're only pitching more than once a week. It's a different dynamic in the pros. And I know there's the argument that Paul Skeens has only pitched for a couple years because he was a catcher for the most part. So yes, there is less tread on the tires, so to speak, but it doesn't change the dynamic. And I think Stephen Brault, former Pirates pitcher, current Pirates analyst, talked about this too. He said, you still want to keep it in front of you that, 15 pitches per inning is something that you keep that number in front of you, because if you start to exceed that more than once or twice in the game, it's going to add up as the innings go along and probably shorten your opportunity in the game. Let's go to Manny in Pittsburgh. Manny, you're on the Nightly Sports Call. Hello, Manny.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I was wondering, technically two questions. If we're going to limit Jared Jones' pitches, why not use Jared Jones for like 3 innings and use Martin Perez as a reliever when he's only pitched 1 game in like 3 months for AAA? And also, of all the prospects, who do you think is going to be the next at-bat that's going to be on the bench instead of Shelty going to Triolo?
That second question was very confusing, but thank you for the call. To answer the first question, limiting Jared Jones, we're not talking about limiting his pitches as much as we're talking about limiting innings. Because limiting pitches, it's hard to do that specifically unless you're talking about over a specific period of time. Now, if a guy gets lit up in the first 3 or 4 innings, let's say he's thrown 70 pitches in the first 4 innings. He's probably not going past the 5th or the 6th inning if he moves well through those. So when we talk about limiting pitches specifically, we're not talking about just over a small sample. We're talking about over time into the length of a game. Now, limiting innings is a different story because they track innings over the course of the season more than they track pitches. And both of these guys have a certain inning number that they pitched previously, and there's a certain percentage above that number from the previous year that they don't try to go past. And that's the gauge that they use. It's not necessarily pitches, Suzie, as much as it is innings. And I understand that some people can't understand the correlation there, but that is the difference.
And to kind of just finish up that question, the problem with the Pirates rotation right now is the fact that they need that 5th starter back in the rotation. So now that Martin Perez is back, he fills that hole. So putting him in a reliever position right now, just so Jared Jones only goes 3 innings in a start, doesn't make sense, because then you're going to be pulling from your bullpen again, once again, to make spot starts when you have a true starter in Martin Perez. That move doesn't necessarily make sense to me right now, unless Martin Perez comes out in his next couple of starts and he just absolutely blows it and proves that he can only go, maybe 2-3 innings now after his injury a month ago. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I would keep him in that 5th starter spot because, again, like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, the Pirates might have to look for a 6th starter while they start limiting the innings of Jared Jones and Paul Skeens.
We got to take another break. When we come back, we got to talk about a couple pit players getting the opportunity in the NBA. We'll discuss that before we wrap up. Stick around.